Mr. Singhvi, you know, every time there is a situation of political instability, legal options are definitely explored. I want to ask you today, what are the legal options that lie before Mr. Uddhav Thackeray when the numbers clearly seem to be stacked against him?
There is a very strong political aspect here, but I'll not go into that since you're asking me completely legal options, and I'll try and give a conceptual answer. And I'm not giving an answer only from Mr. Uddhav Thackeray's viewpoint. Option number one, legal, is clear. If they really did have the magic number and that 37 was crossed, and therefore there was no anti-defection, then normally I would have expected by now a claim, a formal claim for forming the government filed with the governor, followed with a parade of the requisite number. I don't find that yet. Instead, I find a strange letter by Mr. Shinde claiming, letter to the governor, asking to be recognized as the CLP leader, whereas the governor has no role in that at all. That's an intra-party matter. That leads me to think that Mr. Shinde does not have the requisite numbers, and the BJP and Mr. Shinde's combined do not have the requisite numbers. Otherwise, you would have had that letter by now. And that is the best proof that the figures which we have seen floating since yesterday, from 30 to 35 to 37 to 42 to 46 to 45, perhaps are more ambitious and illusory than they appear to be. Second option is that that a properly filed complaint on behalf of the Uddhav Thackeray group with the deputy speaker, because there is no speaker there, is received. It is then followed by a notice by the deputy speaker to the opposite side, so-called. The opposite side appears, files whatever they have to file, the matter is heard, and on the basis of the material and the hearing, the MLAs are disqualified or the MLAs are not disqualified depending on what the speaker holds. Now that is option number two. However, that option does have an inbuilt time lag, notice, counter, rejoinder, arguments, etc. And that is the second issue, by which time it is possible that with the time lag, the fruits of the poisonous tree are already consumed and benefit those who have actually planted the poisonous fruit. Third is the shenanigans which have developed in the course of time on Indian defection law. For example, you can circumvent a lot of defection law by simply reducing the size of the house. An assembly of 100 by 25 resignations can be made into an assembly of 75. And then in that 75, a reduced number can form a majority. And then after you change the government with these illegal means, the very same people who have defected or caused this confusion can be made ministers, and then getting a further lease of life of 6 months to be re-elected. Now, there is a whole movement out there saying that no, this should be a disqualification for them for the entire term, and they should not be allowed to become ministers and be re-elected. But that's not the law today. And that loophole has been exploited in the past. The fourth is that if Mr. Thackeray miraculously finds within tonight and tomorrow that he has the large requisite number, then he is entitled to in fact move for a motion of confidence. I'm not saying it will happen, I'm not saying it will not happen, I'm just giving you the legal option.
Right. Mr. Singhvi, the fact is right now, it's been debated ad nauseum in various studios. You have a lot of spokespersons who continuously, especially those leaning towards Eknath Shinde, come out and say the Eknath Shinde Sena is the real Shiv Sena, because the majority of the numbers in terms of the MLAs out of the 55 are with Eknath Shinde. Now, is just sheer numbers enough?
Your voice is gone.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mr. Singhvi,
yes,
can you hear me?
Repeat the last sentence.
The question I want to ask you is, are sheer numbers enough to suggest that the real Shiv Sena right now is Eknath Shinde's and not Uddhav Thackeray's?
See, that's begging the question. If you say real Shiv Sena in mere numbers, it may be true, because the numbers in Guwahati may be more than the numbers not in Guwahati within the Shiv Sena. But again, it's begging the question, because if you by real Shiv Sena mean that has the 2/3 gate pass allowed by the constitution been fulfilled, then obviously that is yet to be proved. As a matter of fact, I told you, had really 2/3 gone of the Shiv Sena number, you would have by now had a proper formal stake to claim to form the government and a floor test demand before the governor. The fact that Mr. Shinde has not made that, the fact that the BJP and Mr. Shinde together have not written to the governor to that effect. Remember, this is a friendly state government, central government, and the appointee of a friendly central government is the governor. The fact that they have not done so is proof positive of the fact that they don't have the requisite numbers. So the word real begs the question. If you say just mere numbers that 10 are mine and 5 are yours and therefore I am the real, it may be true. But if you say that in the law of defection, which otherwise takes place, the real happens only if 2/3 leave and not one person less than 2/3. Well, then it begs the question, who is the real one?
Well, if the because if you're saying they don't have the numbers, then when the anti-defection law does kick in, can these rebel MLAs be disqualified, Mr. Singhvi?
I've just answered that question. Of course they can be, but that takes a process. I have to complain. The complaint has to be taken up by the Deputy Speaker. He gives a notice, the other side replies, then he hears them like a judge, and then he passes an order. Of course he can disqualify. I just said that.
But,
according to me, it is blatant defection and clear disqualification.
Right. But Mr. Singhvi, we are assuming that he doesn't have the numbers because you think if he had those numbers, then he would have come in for the kill already, right?
No, I am not saying that, I don't know the figures, it's a very fast-moving case, but it seems very odd that nobody has made a claim to form the government, nobody has demanded a floor test. If they had the numbers which they are bouncing around with, that would have happened by now.
Mr. Singhvi, I'm going to ask you two quick questions now. Moving away from your legal perspective, you're from the Congress. The Congress would also need to look at its own lot with what is developing right now in Maharashtra. You are a part of the Maha Vikas Aghadi. The fact, sir, it gives a bit of a testimony to what is going on within the Congress. The Deputy Speaker belongs to the NCP. The post of the Speaker was supposed to be yours. Ever since Mr. Nana Patole left it because, he got a different position in your party, you haven't filled it up. Do you think that could cost you?
On the contrary, I think both the NCP and the Congress have acquitted themselves very well. Consider these facts. Number one, NCP and I are both outliers. We are boundary players. This is an intra-Sena dispute. It's not created by us, it's not caused by us, it's not of our making. Two, nevertheless, we have stood steadfast by the Aghadi, steadfast with Mr. Thackeray, who was a member of the Aghadi. Number three, do you think in all these shenanigans in the last 3 days, there would not have been a huge amount of inducements and efforts against NCP and Congress MLAs also? Do you think that a party which gets 90% plus of the electoral bonds with these huge resources would have kept quiet for NCP and MLAs? The fact of the matter is that not one single person is alleged to have moved allegiance in these two parties. Is that not creditable? So let us not kind of, just generally expect debate.
But Mr. Singhvi, the fact is it might be the internal matter of the Shiv Sena. It has not just potential, it's staring you in the face where it could bring down your government, which you are a part of. Yes, in Maharashtra. And having said that, both the NCP and the Congress have stood steadfast behind the Shiv Sena, yes, till now. But sir, you and I both know better, and you way better than I, that the NCP has the history of pulling a fast one or a rabbit out of the hat at the last minute, even with allies.
I think there are enough problems going on for the last 3 days than to indulge in this complete speculative, hypothetical, imaginary. It would be called the outpouring of a febrile and a fertile imagination that this will happen, and then because of this will happen, and then because the NCP did this 20 years ago, it is likely to do this tomorrow.
Right.
I don't think that is at all a constructive or even a reasonable way of looking at things.
All right.
What is there is there.
No, sir, that was in connection to the Deputy Speaker's post which you allowed the NCP to get. But I'll ask you one quick question, Mr. Singhvi, before I let you go. In good faith, if your ally Uddhav Thackeray asked you for legal advice, and I'm sorry I'm asking you this on national television, what would you tell him to do now?
I would tell you first for him that how do you know that I have not already been asked, and I would be the last person to divulge privileged legal communication. Howsoever clever the journalist who is asking me the question and possibly getting something out of me, but it would not happen.
Well, it's my duty to ask, sir. Try, as I might. But
absolutely, and you tried well.
Well, appreciate you joining us.